Like we're talking about, take a look at the general condition. You can learn a lot from the bolts and such. Obviously what you want, we just put these brand new bolts on the bike. That would be great to see. But most of the time, you're gonna see kind of some rusty bolts, and you can learn a lot if the bolts look like they're rounded off or stripped. Then, the bike's definitely been apart a lot of times, and you might want to be careful with buying that bike. And also, just if it has rust on it, like this bike does, that's a sign that it was maybe stored outside, that it was neglected, left out in the rain. That certain parts weren't greased. So, just something to watch out for. And similar with the chain and sprockets, if the chain was oiled regularly and cleaned, it should be a black color, or some chains are gold. But really what you're looking out for is a lot of rust on the chain. And obviously you want to check that it doesn't have too much side-to-side play, that it's not completely worn out. But just a good indicator of how the owner cared for the bike. On this bike it is a little bit rusty, and a lot of the bolt heads and various steel items on the bike are showing some rust. So it's a little bit of a negative, kind of shows that the bike was left outside. So something to watch out for, but it's not a total deal breaker. So what do we got next, Bobby? What's next on the list?
Let's see. You want to check that your bike has most of its original bolts. This bike did not come with any original bolts. We had to purchase a lot of new bolts, and that was very painstaking.
That's right. You want at least, even if they're not the OEM bolts, if they're at least like the same size or the same type of bolts, it shows that the owner cared for the bike. If it's just random bolts that the guy found to put in the bike, then obviously not a good sign, and just shows that the bike was neglected again. So, the bolts can tell you a lot, condition of them, type of bolts,
All right,
so just take a close look.
Next, you want to see any funny things on the bike. I think the first thing noticed was this clutch cable condition. It was a little weird.
That's right.
It's got
I noticed that clutch cable, which looks like it has some RTV on it. We thought it was maybe JB Weld at first. You just want to look out for stuff like this, because it could be hiding like a crack in the case or something like that. In this case, it looks like maybe the owner thought that there was a leak where the clutch cable goes in, and they wanted to seal it up. It's really not necessary if everything's functioning properly. But anyway, we asked the owner to open the ignition cover for us, and we inspected everything. It looked fine. So, it was a little bit of a red flag, but turned out to be fine.
Yeah, and if the owner is willing to pop that cover open, you may discover like a flat away wheel. Knows what else you may discover, but if that guy doesn't want to take it off, something's wrong, walk away.
Yeah, and also you could bring your own tools, especially for something like this, just a Phillips head. So again, if the owner's hesitant about you taking it off, they might be trying to hide something, so just got to judge the situation and go from there.
Also, while you're here, take a look at the carburetor and the boot. Make sure it's not ripped. There's no play in it. Otherwise, it's going to get a really rough running bike. So this certainly is going to break up.
Yep. So a few other things here. You see the red RTV. Sometimes that's a bad sign, because really you'd like the owner to use the OEM gaskets. The RTV might be a sign that the owner skipped out on buying the correct gaskets, and possibly was just trying to fix some leaking issue without spending the money, the few dollars on gaskets. Also, this fuel line setup, if you see these clamps, these aren't OEM clamps. Same here. And also, these don't come with the fuel filter, so it's nice to have the fuel filter, but some of these clamps that aren't really appropriate for this type of vehicle is a little bit of a red flag. Kind of shows maybe the person that had it was a younger kid, didn't really know what he was doing. So make sure nothing critical was messed up on the bike.
Yeah, obviously, guys, you want to make sure the seat can come off real easy. Check out that air filter. Make sure it's all clean. Even take the air filter off and make sure the air intake track is clean. Otherwise, a lot of these guys may ride with a dirty one for a long time. Got a lot of stuff in there. Never clean it out. Bad for you when you buy it.
Yep. Yeah, so usually these are 8 or 10 millimeter bolts to take the seat out. So you definitely want to bring 8 or 10s, both 8 and 10 sockets, just to have when you show up, and you could take a look at the air filter, and just the cleanliness of the air boot will tell you a lot about how the bike was taken care of.
Yep. And then while you're here again, just take a look at this shifter lever. Make sure there's no weird play. That it's snappy.
Yeah, you can take a look at the pinch bolt down here. Make sure it's tight. Sometimes these will rattle loose, and if the owner had left it like that, obviously that's not a good sign. This one's in really good shape. Looks like you probably got it new recently.
Yeah. All right, let's
Really
move
tight.
forward. Moving forward on this bike, I think the issue we found when we took off some of the plastics was a leaky radiator with some, I don't know what that is, kind of like a putty, would you say?
Yep, looks like some kind of epoxy or JB Weld type of situation, which is a little bit of a red flag. You want the owner to fix the bike properly if he cracks a radiator by either getting a new one or getting it welded up. This is a little bit of a temporary fix, but if it's holding fluid, it's not the end of the world, but might be something you mention. Try to get a few bucks off the asking price.
Sounds good. Let's move more forward. Pay attention to the shocks, maybe the shock seals.
Yeah, I mean, this is the main area. A lot of used bikes will have leaking fork seals. So you'll see oil all the way down the fork tubes and sometimes around the brake area at the bottom of the forks. So take a look at that. Take a look at the fork bodies also. If you get a serious dent on these, it'll keep the fork from working properly. So if the bike was dropped on a rock or something.
Yep.
So these are not too bad. They got some scratches, but no dents or anything like that.
And they were very expensive, about $2,500 if something's really wrong with them.
Yep. Take a look under your fender. A lot of time the 4 screws down here, they can get stripped or be missing. So just another good sign of how the owner took care of the bike. Take a look at your wheels. Go through and grab the spokes. You're likely to find a few that are loose, but as long as none of them are broken or bent or extremely loose, then it's a good sign. What else?
I'll take a look at the tire condition. Some of these tires can be real old, real rotted. This one's old, but it's in good condition.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably going to want to change the tires on the dirt bike anyway when you pick it up, but yeah, it'll let you know if the owner rode it recently, or maybe it's been sitting for years and years, and then you might want to be a little more attentive as far as buying the bike. If you notice the tires are really dry and cracked, it might be a reason why the bike was sitting for so long.
Also, make sure there's no massive damage to the rim itself. These rims can get expensive. Make sure the bearings are good.
Yeah, you want to rock the wheel back and forth, see if there's any play in the bearings. A lot of times the rear wheel is more likely, to have the bearings go bad. The fronts usually last quite a while. But yeah, go around, check if there's any dents on the rim, give it a spin, see if the wheel is true. These are pretty nice Accela rims, so kind of lucked out on this bike at least with the wheel situation.
Yep, definitely. Let's move further along. Let's keep going. So, moving up towards the bike. Got some funky situation going on with the clutch cable. We did order new parts, but things like this you may want to watch out for.
Yeah, a lot of times these clutch adjusters will be stripped or damaged, and people will try to kind of rig them up just to get it to work. So just take a look at that, see how the bike was treated. If it's stuff like this, that's not the best sign, you know. But if it does work, then nothing to be scared of, really. But take a look at the handlebars also, from the front and from the back. A lot of times they'll be bent, and you won't really see it when you're up close, but when you step back, you'll see there's a bend in it. Sometimes it's just the mounts that need to be readjusted, but it could also be the actual bar that's bent.
Definitely good tip.
Take a look at the grips. Like this one on the left, it's not glued on properly, so it kind of spins and moves around a lot. You know, not a good sign. Again, a lot of these they're not deal breakers, but you just want to watch out, because if the owner's a younger guy and he doesn't really maintain things properly, then you might be in for some headaches down the road. So
yeah, I mean, get some bargaining power on your side. See if you can get a deal that'll be worthwhile your time in fixing this thing.
Yep. Take a look at the throttle operation. Make sure there's no grabby spots in it. You know, that could indicate there's a issue with the cable being frayed or some kind of carburetor problem. So just make sure the throttle's smooth. Obviously check the brake. Check that the brake is solid. Just in general, take a look at the handlebars. A lot of times, if you have these hand guards on there and they're all in different positions or they're bent, you know, that kind of shows that the bike was abused. But if they're set up nice, like, you know, nice, everything's tight on there, everything's even, then, you know, that's a good sign that the bike was maintained.
Great tips. Let's go come over here on this side. Take a look at the clutch cover area. So down here, you may want to initially inspect just the kicker itself. Like this one, it's got some, you know, probably doesn't have the ball and spring adjusted properly, or not there at all.
Yeah, definitely take a look at the kicker, see how much play there is. This one's not actually terrible, but it is missing the spring that holds it in. So again, these things are not cheap on some bikes. It could be over $100, so something to definitely use as bargaining power. Again, the RTV on the cover, not a good sign. Basically, the owner cheaped out on buying the gaskets. And also, if you see here, there's some grinding marks on the ears, so that might indicate that there was some damage and it was welded, or the owner tried to repair in some way. So
yeah, and these covers are actually stronger than the factory covers, so some kind of rough riding did happen.
Yep.
Yeah, also while you're here, check out the brake lever. This one has a lot of side play, because actually the brake pivot bolt is wrong. It's actually off the earlier YZs, and this has turned out to be a common thing, because these bolts are kind of expensive, so people just find whatever other bolt fits, but it will give you this monstrous side play.
Yep, it's a good point. Check out the pipe. Obviously, this one's got some dents. Not the worst we've seen, but you got to factor that into the price if you want a nice clean pipe. That's going to be a couple $100, so definitely use that for bargaining power also.
For sure.
Stuff like this, like there's supposed to be kind of a spring seal on that exhaust joiner, and the owner has a worm gear clamp. So stuff like that kind of shows the owner doesn't quite know what he's doing or what it's supposed to look like. So, you know, if you have any doubts about like the motor, that the owner was in there, you definitely don't want somebody that does that to be working on a motor, as kind of indicates that they don't quite know what they're doing. So, but if the motor's all stock and the person never looked at it, then, you know, nothing to worry about, right?
If it runs, it's good.
If it runs, yep.
Let's continue with the pipe. This previous owner repacked the pipe. There's more RTV present in the muffler, and it's actually really clean, really well maintained.
Yep, pipe's in good shape. No real damage. It does look like it's a little bent sideways. I'm not sure if that's by design. But otherwise it looks like it's in good shape, so nothing wrong with that. Check your rear brake caliper. These ones, the pads are pretty low. Again, just a sign of neglect if the owner let the pads get to nothing. Just not a good sign of how the bike was maintained. So check your rear wheel bearings, make sure there's no play. Check all the spokes, same stuff as the front. Make sure all the bolts are there in the brake disc and especially in the sprocket. The sprocket bolts can come out a lot easier than the brake disc, so take a look at those. Take a look at your chain guide. Make sure on the other side, make sure there's material left on the chain guide, that it's not too worn out. This one actually has a crack, right?
Yeah, it's totally cracked.
The slider on the swing arm is cracked. So little stuff like that, you're probably not going to get the owner to go down in price too much, but that's just a mental note you want to make because you're going to have to replace that down the road. So you have to decide if that's worth it for you to invest into this bike.
Definitely. What do we got next?
What else we got?
Check all functions and leaks, fluid levels.
Yeah, don't forget to pop the radiator cap. Obviously make sure the bike's not hot. Make sure the person didn't run it. Some of these are a little tough to get into, but just pop that cap off. This one's really tough to get into, Bobby.
Things happen.
Pop off the cap. Make sure the fluid is at an acceptable level, which most dirt bikes it should be right above the radiator fins. And just take a look if it looks clean. If it's like brown or discolored, that's not a good sign.
The cap looks brand new.
Cap looks new, yep. It's kind of good sign, but a lot of people just buy this for bling, so not really an indicator of anything. In fact, if you got a bike like this where the owner cheaped out on gaskets but bought a fancy radiator cap, that might not be a good sign, right?
Could be anything.
Owner cares more about bling than functionality. Crack your other radiator, Bobby. Putting this on. All right, good. What else?
I think you should check your oil quality if you can. Inspect the oil level. A lot of these guys put a lot of oil in here to try to mask any type of noise the motor can make.
Yeah, definitely. If there's a sight glass, check the level and the color of the oil. This one actually doesn't have anything, so it's kind of hard to do it. But sometimes you could lean the bike over, take out the filler plug, and dip your finger in the oil and get an idea that way. While you're at it, also check your drain plug under the motor. Make sure that area isn't cracked or stripped out. A lot of times you'll see JB Weld around that drain plug, and that might be because somebody over tightened and stripped the threads out or something like that. So check that area.
Pro tip. That's a good tip.
Yep. What other fluids we got? Brake fluids.
Got brake fluid.
If the brakes are working, you can check the sight glasses for the condition of the oil in your brakes. And it's always good to look in the gas tank. Make sure you don't see any debris in there. Smell the gas. See if it's, obviously make sure it's not too stale. And always good to ask the owner what kind of premix they're using. If it's a two-stroke bike, if they can't answer that question, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, definitely. Also, a lot of guys you may see online, especially on Reddit, YouTube, they'll talk about mixing ratios. A lot of guys follow the OEM spec mixing ratios. There's a lot of knowledge about the, or dishonest knowledge about the 60-to-1 mix ratio for off-road bikes. If you're doing like single track, that 60-to-1 is clowning, man. What do you say?
Yeah, definitely ask the owner what ratio they're using, and also what type of oil, because different oils suggest, they have different lubricity, so they suggest different mixing ratios. But just asking the owner, and if they can give you a straight answer, then you get some confidence that they know what they're doing, and that they've worked on the bike recently, or they rode it recently. If they're not sure, or they're kind of stuttering about answering those questions, then kind of shows they don't know what they're doing with the bike. So something to watch out for.
All right, just pop a question about what kind of oil weight is in your forks. If you can't answer that in 12 seconds, don't buy the bike.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think most people won't answer that. But ask them what kind of premix, and also what kind of transmission oil they're using. Ask them how often they change it. Whether it's once every 5 rides, or once a year, or whatever they're doing.
I mean, best just check it yourself. You'll really know the answer to a lot of his maintenance needs.
Yep. Always good to take a look yourself. What else we got? Condition of the levers. You can learn a lot if the levers are bent, or if they got the little round piece snapped off. Could tell you a lot also. Obviously the bike, might be seeing some hard use, might be dropped pretty often. And just in general, if the owner has some nice levers and keeps up on replacing them, it's a good sign that the bike was taken care of.
Yeah. So guys, this bike is actually in decently clean condition. I think when you go look at a dirt bike, it may resemble something like this, where the owner just rode it and you arrived to pick it up.
That's right. He had just washed it and he got it ready for you to look at it.
So you're probably going to see something more like this. It's got dirt everywhere. A lot of these guys use dirt to mask a lot of washings. Problems can be easily masked with dirt. You may want to clean it, or have him clean it before you look at it, so that there's no surprises when you take it home.
That's right. Another thing is the operation of the clutch is a big one that you want to look out for. You want to just grab the clutch lever and make sure it works smoothly. If it's really hard to pull, or if it's very notchy, even with the bike off, that suggests that the clutch cable hasn't been lubricated, or maybe it's frayed and old. So something to watch out for. And then when you start the bike, you want to put it in gear and make sure the clutch engages smoothly. If it's very notchy, might mean that you need a new clutch basket, or there might be some other expense in clutch maintenance. So that's kind of a big sign. And also make sure the bike shifts through all the gears. Even if the owner doesn't let you ride the bike,
put on the stand, start shifting.
Yep, either on the stand or on the ground. Just go through all the gears. You could even let out the clutch a little bit, make sure the bike is moving, make sure you don't hear any strange sounds from the engine, and then you could at least be confident all the gears are working and shifting mechanism is good.
Yeah, also if the bike is breaking up on the stand while you're revving it, it could be this carb boot sucking in a lot of air. So don't be afraid. That's actually a common thing on a lot of these dirt bikes. It can be fixed pretty quickly, but that gives you some bargaining power.
Yep. Yeah, but definitely either have the owner start the bike for you, or ask him if you can kickstart it. Check if the bike is hot. You might want to put your hand next to the radiator or the pipe. If the bike's already warmed up, could be a sign that it doesn't start well when it's cold, and the owner hadn't warmed it up for you before you got there. And also, after you start it, obviously give it some revs. Make sure the motor is revving good, but you also want to let it idle down and just leave the bike and see if it stalls. See if it starts running badly if you just let it idle. And sometimes that could be an easy fix of just adjusting idle speed, but other times it could be a carburetor issue or some running issue that you may not want to deal with.
Yeah,
So,
it could be wrong jetting.
yep. And a lot of times also if it's way too rich, it can foul the plug if you just let it idle. So those issues will become apparent if you let the bike run for a little bit and just kind of take your time listening to it and seeing what it does. Don't get too excited about riding it right off the bat. Let it warm up a little bit and see how it performs.
Great tips.